Welcome to A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown, with your hosts Chris Robinson and Fleur Summers.
Over the course of this series, Fleur and I will be discussing some of the main themes and concepts surrounding the Procurement Act 2023 and what it will mean to the public sector ahead of launch. Fleur and I have a combined 40 years public sector procurement experience and will be using some of that experience to share our knowledge and insights around the Act itself.
So let's get into today's topic.
Hello and welcome to A Procurement Podcast, the Reform Rundown, Episode 3.
Firstly, we just wanted to say thank you so much for all the support on our first two podcasts. I think both myself and Chris, we were blown away by the amount of likes and impressions that we've received so far. And it's really given us the encouragement to continue covering what is a fundamental change to the public sector later this year with the new Procurement Act.
And when we look into that in more detail, I think probably an opportune moment to kind of stop and pause and consider where we are at right at this moment in time and information from, shall we say, the official line or channel of communications. And many of you may well have seen that most recently we received an email from the Cabinet Office as part of their regular Transforming Public Procurement updates. The Procurement Regulations 2024 themselves are expected to be released around about mid to late March this year. With that, Fleur, and I'm sure that you're in agreement with this, that, you know, again, of course, these are actually subject to parliamentary approval, but hopefully, you know, we will, as I've said already, hope to see these in mid to late March, so any time now really, but the regulations themselves, once they are available, will no doubt be of real comfort to the sector. And of course, again, will accompany the content within the Act itself, which is already available and has been available since October of last year. So hopefully with the regs, it will provide further details and assurance, especially in areas that are new to the sector. You know, and a lot of these areas themselves, of course, we intend and have started to cover as part of this podcast series itself.
Yeah, and I think this is like one of the areas that we're all waiting for, isn't it? So as we've mentioned in our previous podcast, we've got the legislation, but I think it's waiting for these regulations to come now.
It starts to bring everything to life, doesn't it? You know,
yeah.
And I can think back, as I'm sure you do, you know, in terms of the public contract regulations and the various iterations
yeah.
to that.
Yeah, definitely.
That, you know, when they came out and seeing the updates to that and regulations, legislation that sits around it, it does certainly start to feel
real.
Absolutely.
This is happening.
100% for sure.
So I think for today's topic, we're going to cover a couple of areas that obviously the public sector already have familiarity with. However, the Act is making it abundantly clear that it will have greater emphasis on it moving forward. So these two areas that we're going to talk about today and have just a general conversation about are sustainability and social value.
Absolutely. So our intent then for this particular podcast, of course, is to take each one of these in turn and discuss further. And as ever, as I'm sure that we'll close out on this particular podcast as well, you know, we'll be keen to hear your views and opinions on both of these areas, and leave your comments in below the actual recording itself. When we have a look then at these, so starting off with sustainability, well, actually, I'll pause there a moment and restart. I would suggest that as a sector, in the public sector, in the past, perhaps maybe not so much today, but in the past, the sector has struggled to identify the differentiation between sustainability and social value.
But they are very different and they should be treated differently because they are separate.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think, you know, as you and I have, reviewing the Act, and hopefully it'll be made even more clearer within the regulations that these are, in fact, two very separate areas for consideration.
But areas that we're going to be able to give more emphasis to going forwards.
Yes, definitely, 100%. And, you know, this emphasis will no doubt be prevalent within the specifications in the tender documentation and then subsequently...
questions, evaluation criteria, all those types of areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess leading into carrying on past that, just the procurement into contract management as well.
Yeah, definitely. So with sustainability, then, if we take that one just to kick off, then for you, Fleur, sustainability, what does that mean to you as an experienced public sector procurement professional?
So I think to me, in terms of sustainability, it's looking at those things such as like ethical sourcing, isn't it? Responsible procurement, making sure we cover off those. We're working with responsible suppliers that cover in areas such as equality, diversity, modern slavery, supply chain management, all those types of areas. Are they those sort of things that you would think of?
Definitely resonate with me, everything that you've just mentioned there, when you consider sustainability as part of a public sector procurement exercise. I think, oftentimes in the past and under the existing PCRs, public procuring organisations have often looked at sustainability, and you just touched on there, the deliverables of an immediate supplier that's awarded to deliver a contract. Looking at the content within the Act itself, and any time now we're going to be seeing the regulations. I think there's going to be even greater emphasis on public procuring bodies to scrutinise the wider supply chain of that.
Going further into it,
For sure. And I think you've already hit the nail on the head in that, when you say that these will be considerations that will be put as part of evaluation criteria now. Now, the weighting's behind that. Now, keep me honest on this, Fleur, but I don't, I don't recall there being a mandated weighted figure around sustainability.
Not for sustainability, no.
No. So again, it's a consideration for public procuring organisations, but actually the Act itself, and therefore the regulations, are going to be silent in terms of mandating a particular weighting, which I, for one, think is a positive, because actually what it allows the public procuring bodies to do is give due consideration to the theme of sustainability, but actually not be forced to dilute their evaluation criteria by adding too high a weighting to sustainable procurement.
And I guess also make it potentially like tailoring it to the requirement, because you might have some that have more areas you want to cover for sustainability than others. So I guess it's having that more flexibility, isn't it, to be able to do that as part of your procurement process.
Definitely. So as you've already alluded to, so in the evaluation criteria, and then subsequently we'll be expecting to see this to be a feature in a good number of KPIs and contract milestones, service level agreements, post-contract award, and the management activities of that for sure. It is, again, just to kind of recap what we've discussed there, there is a clear indication that sustainability will have a greater bearing on procurement evaluation exercises. And many sector organisations, I would suggest, from my own humble personal experience, perhaps maybe don't have the intel and expertise in this regard. So, I think there's...
Definitely agree.
Would you suggest that there's a degree of upskilling for the sector to fully understand what sustainability is, and if we row back to what we discussed earlier, getting them to understand and appreciate the differences between sustainability and social value?
And I guess how to bring it into their procurements, how to incorporate it into it so it's meaningful and brings the information that they need to get from it.
Definitely. I can recall some of the public sector organisations I worked with in previously, and perhaps maybe, dare I say, some of the more forward-thinking ones, and they had designated champions, if you will. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah. Subject matter experts, those type of things.
Definitely. They're focused on sustainable themes and content, and I would certainly, as I'm sure Fleur would endorse as well, encourage public procuring organisations, if they do have the availability of such colleagues within an organisation,
work with them as part of their procurements and ensure it's like a consistent approach incorporated.
So there's a thought for you then, Fleur. Then are we expecting then, as part of the evaluation, that organisations that have that resource and personnel available, that they become part of a wider evaluation team?
Would say so, definitely. Would help support on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Should we move on to social value?
Yes, let's talk about social value. So social value isn't new though, is it? Social value has been around for a long time in terms of, what is it, Social Value Act 2012? So it's not something new, but obviously with the changes in the Procurement Act in terms of the meet to mat and being able to give a bit more emphasis to social value, I think we're going to see a lot more of it going forwards.
Do you think, I know we talked about this already, but do you think this is where you get the mix up and sometimes the amalgamation of sustainability and social value in terms of interpretation within public procuring bodies, in that both of which could simply be argued are doing the right thing, what's morally correct?
Yeah. But they are very different. They're looking at different things. They're trying to get different information, social values, what could they offer to the local area as part of the procurement, and then going subsequently into the contract that they can then deliver as part of it, in terms of what wider benefits could be achieved.
Sure. And as you've already alluded to there, the Social Value Act itself was released in 2012, so here we are 12 years later, and over a review of the Act and the regulations to follow, there is a clear indication that the instruction for public procuring bodies is to have even greater emphasis on social value within their procurement exercises itself.
So do you think that's going to mean that we're going to see a bit more than just like a small percentage given to social value, and we'll start seeing a bit more emphasis, like, I don't know, 10%, something like that?
I would suggest so. I'd also perhaps maybe see a move away from, referring to my previous experience, albeit a number of years ago now, then this nominal value, this lip service to, we'll apply a high weighting to a provider that proposes a promise to perhaps maybe submit a charitable donation to a cause within the community of that public sector procuring organisation. This is going to be a further drill down. And of course, what we have and have had for a good number of years now is the social value TOMs, the themes, outcomes and measures. Absolutely. Which I think will be a very useful tool for public sector organisations when, again, identifying how to actually
incorporate it.
That's right.
I think in terms of public sector authorities, I think you'll find that there are some that are already quite advanced in how they do it, and probably using like the TOMs and those type of things to bring social value into it. But I think there's always the others on the other side of the scale where, yes, it has been around since 2012, but not necessarily gone too far in terms of exploring how they could incorporate it. So I think we'll definitely see a lot more of it, but also around needing to make sure that it follows through into the contract management side, because if you include it, you want to see those deliverables, don't you? You want to see what is actually being delivered. Have they delivered what they committed to as part of their bid?
Now, we're going to cover the contract management in a future podcast,
Definitely.
Of course.
That's going to be a big area to cover.
It certainly is. But, when you look at both sustainability and social value, we've both said already that, these are really useful areas and mechanisms that could be used as key performance indicators. And again, I would certainly suggest that public procuring bodies and I, for one, would encourage them to develop key performance indicators around both of these things.
Sustainability, definitely. Have consistent ones.
Definitely. Really hold the feet to the fire of the suppliers that the promises and proposals that they put in tender submissions, they actually deliver year on year throughout the duration of the contract in these two areas. So here's the killer question then, Fleur. Okay.
Oh no.
Put you on the spot here, haven't I? Is there, and this is for the benefit of the listeners, of course, is there a correct amount of weighting to apply to social value, do you think?
I don't think you could say there should be X amount weighting on everything, but I think it needs to be considered in the round in terms of what is being procured and the benefit it could bring to it. I think it'd be difficult to set a specific weighting for everything, because it might not fit that amount for all requirements.
Definitely.
It needs to be something that is tailored for the actual procurement and the contract.
Sure. So I think, kind of like in summary there, what you're saying is that consider the procured subject matter. What is the most important elements of that procured subject matter itself? Obviously, playing due diligence and consideration about social value and sustainability, but I think one of the potential pitfalls that public procuring bodies may well have is actually applying too high a weighting.
Going the other way.
Diluting the real importance of what is the major considerations of that procured subject matter itself.
So I think that's probably it in terms of this podcast, covering sustainability and social value, and a bit in terms of where we are currently and what we are expecting to see over the next month in terms of the regulations. So as ever, as Chris mentioned, please, if there are subjects that you'd like us to have a discussion on as part of these podcasts, please do let either myself or Chris know, and we can definitely start to incorporate those into future episodes. Thank you everyone for listening. And make sure to tune in for our next episode of the Procurement Podcast, A Reform Rundown.
See you soon.